Hey, welcome to Hannity. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, Herman Cain, will join us in just a few minutes. But first, earlier today, the GOP health care bill was pulled before a vote could take place in the House of Representatives. There's a lot of anger, frustration in Washington, around the country. And tonight, we will examine how we got here and how we can make sure this never happens again. And that is tonight's opening monologue. All right, so the Republican health care bill has officially, at least for the time being, hit a dead end. Now, last night on this program, we told you that the reason Republicans are in this position without a vote to repeal and replace Obamacare is because this legislative process has been way too contentious, unorganized, and disjointed. Now, on a positive side, it's actually a bigger tent party, the Republican Party, than anyone really imagined. But the fact is, after 7 long years of Republicans promising to repeal, replace Obamacare, not getting the job done is unacceptable. Anyway, here's what Speaker Ryan said earlier today.
Moving from an opposition party to a governing party comes with growing pains. And, well, we're feeling those growing pains today. We came really close today, but we came up short.
All right, Speaker Ryan's right. They did come up short, and we need to make sure this never happens again. Let me be very clear here. This is not President Trump's failure. The president went above and beyond, did everything in his power to get this bill across the finish line. And here's how the president reacted this afternoon. Take a look.
We're just a very small number of votes short in terms of getting our bill passed. A lot of people don't realize how good our bill was because they were viewing phase 1. But when you add phase 2, which was mostly the signings of Secretary Price, who's behind me, and you add phase 3, which I think we would have gotten, it became a great bill. Premiums would have gone down, and it would have been very stable, it would have been very strong.
All right, I will admit earlier today I was pretty angry about all this. This shouldn't have happened, but the bottom line at this point, what's done is done. And what has actually emerged here, in my mind, is a huge opportunity if it is used wisely. Now, before I talk about how we can avoid these mistakes and fix this problem, I want to first address the Democrats and members of the alt-left, radical, destroy Trump propaganda media. They're absolutely giddy at what happened today. Now, let's start by looking at how Democrats were behaving on the House floor today before the bill was even pulled. Look at the insanity of their rhetoric.
This is a bad joke on America. Here we are, the Choice Act. The choice is get sick or go broke.
This bill will unravel health care for all Americans.
We are in Lent. It's supposed to be the holiest time. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do unto me. Think about that before you vote for this bill. Please vote against it.
It is not liberty for a woman to be forced to go to work within weeks of having a child. That's what this bill would do.
Yes, I want to ask why the Democratic microphone is turned off. The last 2 speakers we've not been able to hear as well as we heard Ms. Cheney, and I want to know why that is. I hope somebody hears my plea and that the parliamentarian will take care of this problem. This debate is too important to have our microphones at a lower scale.
Older Americans are going to pay for a tax cut for the richest people in this nation. Older Americans are going to be hit the hardest. What does the GOP stand for? Get old people. That's what this bill does.
Yeah, get old people. All right, all you snowflake Democrats, you may be happy this bill was scrapped, but guess what? You're not going to be smiling for long, and that's a promise. Now, since Obamacare was not repealed and replaced, guess what? The country is now going to see just how devastating your statism and how dangerous this law really is. Now, back in February, the CEO of Aetna said Obamacare is in a death spiral. It's only going to get worse. We see premiums now skyrocketing in some places by 117%. Really? Are you happy about that? Is that something to smile about? Are you really happy that over the last decade, in the Obama years, people's plans have gone up $5,400 on average? Democrats, you happy about that? Are you really happy? So many millions of Americans have lost their doctors. By the way, something President Obama and you promised would never happen. Are you really happy? No family saved $2,500 per family per year. Another Obamacare lie and disappointment. But don't worry, Democrats, you're going to be forced to own this mess because you created this mess. So be as happy as you want today, because Americans will see day after day after day firsthand the devastation and the impact of your bad policies. Now, How do we talk about and how do we make sure this never happens again? It's really important to look back and examine what went wrong here so Republicans are not in this position again. Second, Republicans, they've got to go back to the table, this time build a consensus bill. Didn't happen this time. Now, for example, before the GOP Obamacare replacement bill was rolled out, we heard from many House GOP lawmakers right here on this show saying they had no idea what was in that bill that was being scored in the CBO. Take a look. You guys are worried you haven't seen the repeal and replace bill. All four of you have told me that.
I got to see the bill before I can agree to anything. I'm kind of anal like that. I'd like to read the bill. You remember 2010? We all said, if you elect us, you give us the majority, we will read the bill.
If you don't learn from your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them. All right, that's mistake number one. And at the very least, Republicans had a major communications problem as it relates to this bill. So the big question tonight is, all right, going forward, how do we make sure this never happens again? Now, for starters, I would say to the Republican leadership, before you release any bill, there has to be a consensus built from all the different factions of the GOP. In other words, the moderates, the study group, the Tuesday group, the Wednesday group, the Saturday group, the Sunday group, and yes, the Freedom Caucus. All right? Then you won't need a big fight on national TV and radio. In the future, what I would do is the following. Bring everybody into the room. Start the process of building that bill with everybody I just mentioned, knowing and telling everybody they're not going to get everything that they want. Sort of like signing a contract before actually negotiating the terms. You have it backwards. And that means getting everyone in the same room, members of the Senate, Secretary Price, conservative think tanks, moderates, GOP study group, Freedom Caucus, everybody, the White House, make sure the bill is not released until you have consensus on the bill. Now, this would take a lot of the ugliness out of the process. Now the president is moving on. He's forging ahead with his agenda. And remember, he's been keeping all his promises. He's checking those things off his list one by one. So what does this mean going forward? Well, hopefully the Republican leadership has learned a hard lesson. And our elected officials need to take a deep, long, hard, introspective look about how they do business. And my advice is don't put bills together without consulting all these factions within your party. It will serve the American people better. And one thing's clear, voters were not served well in this process, but you will have time for a do-over. Joining us with reaction, the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Treason, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, Newt Gingrich. I was angrier than I want to really admit publicly earlier today. I'm not as angry now. Now I see an opportunity, and I sense that they're not going to make this mistake again. Please tell me they won't do this again this way.
Well, first of all, you have no idea whether or not they'll make that mistake or invent a new mistake. What you do know is that I'm just being honest. What you do know is that Donald Trump is a very smart guy. That he just went through an experience that wasn't what he was told. He had been told that everything was under control, the leadership could deliver, he didn't have to pay too much attention, come in at the very end and close the deal, and it got to be a total mess. Now, I'll guarantee you, if this had been one of his hotels, one of his buildings, one of his golf courses, there'd be a lot of personnel changes tonight. And I think what you're going to see is that he is going to rethink how he approaches the Congress based on this outcome, because it was so totally, utterly unacceptable. At the same time, I think Paul Ryan's at a real turning point. Ryan's a very smart guy. Nobody should take that away from him. And he knows an immense amount about policy. But he's got to decide, in the world of Trump, where you're doing really bold, really different things, is he willing to spend the time and the energy listening to everybody, even when he doesn't agree with them, doesn't think they make any sense? Because we used to use a model of listen, learn, help, and lead. And only by doing this, and you've talked about it some, only by getting everybody in the dialogue, do you have a chance of ultimately getting to a majority. And I think this was an example that starting at the top, trying to run it through the system, is not going to work. It didn't work for Boehner, and I don't think it's going to work for Ryan. And so they're going to have to find some new approaches to go back and get these things done.
Okay, let me ask you if you would like this approach. If you brought like, for example, Reagan relied heavily, and by the way, so did you, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you did a lot of research, renewing American civilization. You have a great relationship with a lot of these really smart think tanks like the Heritage Foundation. If I was going to start over today, what I would do is I would task Secretary Price. I would have him consult with all of these different think tanks. I would have him consult with the moderates. I would have him consult with pro-life people. I'd have him consult with the Freedom Caucus. I'd have him consult with the study group and so on and so forth. And then you're the one that uses the analogy, although you got mad at me on TV one night, about the square. And you build within the square what everybody's wish list is, and then you start telling people what's doable and what's not doable, what's contradictory, what's not contradictory. Thoughts?
Well, no, wait a second. First of all, for the audience's sake, I did not get mad at you. I tried to point out to you.
You dressed me down on national television. What are you talking about?
Sean, after all these years, you're way too sensitive. I suggested that maybe you didn't quite get it, but here, look, here's the deal. I think that when you remember the two things here. Health is life and death for every American, for their children, for their parents, every American. And it is almost 1 out of every $5 in the economy. Now, if you're going to start moving something that scale, I think you ought to do it out in the open. I think the more information you get, the more people who participate. You have this doctor in Wichita, for example. He'd never make it through a Harvard, Yale, Brookings Institution study group, but probably they ought to bring him in and give him time in an open public hearing to explain how his model works. I mean, I can tell you that the Sanford Health System in North and South Dakota is a miraculously effective system. Gunderson Lutheran in western Wisconsin is an amazingly successful system. We ought to be looking for glimmerings that tell us, you know, there's a dramatically better future out here, and if we get the right legislation and we do it the right way, we can give every American a better future. And now that requires, I think, a totally different approach than the one they tried in the first 2 months.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll have more with Speaker Gingrich right after the break, and also coming up next tonight.
We'll probably be going right now for tax reform, which we could have done earlier, but this really would have worked out better if we could have had some Democrat support.
Is it now your intention to go for tax reform, or what's next on your...
We'll probably be going right now for tax reform, which we could have done earlier, but this really would have worked out better if we could have had some Democrat support. Remember this, we had no Democrat support, so now we're going to go for tax reform, which I've always liked.
Hi, that was President Trump speaking earlier today from the White House after the GOP health care bill was pulled. Now, the president said Republicans will now mostly turn their attention to focus on tax reform. We continue with the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. All right. I actually feel pretty optimistic that at the end of the day, they're going to get this health care bill done. I think they have to do it. I think I like your idea of bringing everybody in, but I also like the idea behind closed doors. I don't like the idea of a public fight among every faction in the Republican Party. I don't think it served anybody well.
Look, I like it being out in the open because this is about you. It's about your children. It's about your mother. It's about everybody you know. And I think if you're going to deal with health issues, the more open and public it is, the more let people talk themselves out. You've got a couple committees you can assign this to.
Yeah.
Let them have hearings all over the country, and let them build a consensus.
But the problem with healthcare is your window's closing because reconciliation's over in May, and the next opportunity reconciliation is going to be used on the tax bill.
Look, use reconciliation for the tax bill. Forget reconciliation for health care. The Republican leadership tried to put us between the insanity of the Congressional Budget Office, which is totally phony, and the absurdity of the Senate reconciliation rules, which are goofy. Okay? That's where they tried to do this, and that's why it collapsed, because you couldn't do anything that was explainable to normal, everyday Americans. And people kept saying, well, you don't understand. Eventually in phase 2 or in phase 3.
Right.
This country.
How many Americans know what reconciliation is? How many people know what the bird rule is? How many people know what cloture is? You're right. Why was it in 3 phases, not one phase?
When you say to people, trust me, we're going to fix it in phase 2 and 3, having just elected a president based on the grounds that they don't trust anybody in Washington.
You're right.
And we turn around and ask them to trust us with their lives, it ain't going to work.
Good point. All right, so here's a question I have.
But I'll tell you this. I believe the president should have 2 parallel projects. Tax reform, which I'm totally for, which helps create jobs, and infrastructure, because infrastructure will be bipartisan, will bring Democrats in, will create a different tone, and we need to build a Trump majority of about 300 or 325 in the House and about 65 in the Senate, and just change the tenor of Washington away from this harsh partisanship, which then sets the stage for a much better health bill that might, surprise, surprise, actually have Democrats vote for it.
Okay, I love everything you just said there. I think you're dead on. It's a positive solution. We're going to get some wins out of it. The country's going to be better off, which at the end of the day, I don't care about any of these politicians, to be honest. I care about the American people, the forgotten men and women that elected this president, and he's trying to deliver for. All right, I want to go back to something you said, because earlier this week, Chuck Schumer, I'm going to filibuster. If he's going to filibuster Neil Gorsuch, no Republican could ever pass to get cloture. So that means the nuclear option is probably going to have to be used. Here's my question. Republicans play by one set of rules where they're going to allow an up or down vote for Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Democrats don't play by those rules. Get rid of it. Use the nuclear option. Make it a simple majority in the Senate. Good idea?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have no doubt that Mitch McConnell is going to go to a simple majority. And the fact is, I think Chuck Schumer knows that. But Chuck Schumer knows that his left wing will lynch him if he caves an inch. And so he'd rather survive for another day, give up this ground, which, by the way, when the next Supreme Court seat comes up, is a huge deal. If Schumer creates the precedent that you can approve somebody with 50 votes plus the vice president, now he allows Trump, and the next time, to really move the court towards the most conservative court in modern times.
All right, Mr. Speaker, good points. I think at the end of the day, we'll look back. This was a minor hiccup. And I also think the president comes out looking good because he was so active and involved and showed that he'll work with a lot of people. So I think this is going to be a hiccup through the prism of history. Thank you for being with us. Up next, reaction to the Republican health care bill being pulled earlier today. Herman Cain will join us. He has reaction. And then later tonight,
there was additional unmasking that was done in the documents that I read the other day. I don't know who asked for them to be unmasked. I just know that there are more.
And welcome back to Hannity. All right, so we continue our discussion about the health care bill. Now, is this ever going to happen again? Do they have a better plan for dealing with future legislation? Joining us now, Fox News contributor, former presidential candidate Herman Cain, Mr. 999. All right, so 999 didn't get you elected president, but everyone still remembers it. I think in the end, if I suspect what's going to happen turns out to be true, this continues to collapse Obamacare. Republicans begin to get their act together. They work quietly behind the scenes. They build a consensus bill that'll actually do the job. I think it works out fine. Thoughts?
In the long term, yes. But in the short term, Sean, the Republicans blew it. They blew it. And here's why. You got a Republican in the White House. You got Republicans in control of the House. You got Republicans in control of the Senate, although narrowly. And they should have responded to the #1 concern of the American people, and that was to repeal and replace Obamacare. In the long term, you are probably right. But in the short term, they blew an opportunity.
Do you agree with my analysis that there's another way to do this? You know, everyone, I can't stand the sausage-making analogy anymore that everyone brings up, but there is a way to build consensus. There is a way to get to agreement before you roll it out, nobody having seen it, everybody attacking it publicly. I mean, then the president has to do the heavy lifting. I just think hopefully this is a learning experience because we got a lot of work to do to stop America's precipitous decline. And I don't care that the Democrats are giddy, that they think this is good. Meanwhile, the American people suffer under Obamacare. But, you know, they better learn from this.
Well, I partially agree with you because they rolled this out 3 weeks ago. It was 123 pages, Sean. How long does it take them to read 123 pages? Or the Ways and Means Committee summary, which I read every word in detail. I don't accept that they tried to rush this through. No, it was simple enough and straightforward enough that they should have understood it. No.
No, Harman, I said they didn't build consensus. There's a big difference. They didn't build the consensus that was necessary before they rolled it out, meaning announced it. Nobody saw the bill before they rolled it out. That was the first time they saw it.
But Sean, 3 weeks is enough to build consensus. It was not a complicated bill. 2,700 pages is complicated. I can see where it would take a long time to build consensus. 123 pages is not a lot of pages to build consensus, okay?
I'm talking about, look, in spite of what Democrats say, there is great diversity within the Republican Party. You got a group of moderates, then you got the study group and the Tuesday group and the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday group. Then you got the Freedom Caucus. You have all these groups, and none of them saw the bill ahead of time. And I'm saying that the problems that would naturally emerge with different agendas and different points of view, I think should have been addressed before they rolled it out, because then it put the president in the position of, okay, well, we want to help the moderates in the party. Well, that pisses off the Freedom Caucus, and the Freedom Caucus, they want changes, and that ticks off the moderates in the party, and it doesn't work. I'm saying fix it behind closed doors, roll it out, and say this is our bill, and we're going to support it.
I would agree, Sean. This might be the first time that you and I disagree, which is rare because you know you're my brother from another mother. Here's my point. In 3 weeks, I read it in 3 minutes. I don't accept the fact that they should have built consensus prior to introducing it to the public.
Wow.
They had 3 weeks to read a very simply stated 123-page bill.
Herman, they didn't agree on the bill. That's the problem.
But Sean, here's my point. Please listen to me.
I'm listening.
They didn't agree on it, but why? All of the reasons they didn't agree on it, I don't find substantive. That's why I'm angry. I read it, I looked at it, and I think that those that are opposed to it are wrong. This is why I say,
okay, that's a fair criticism. That's an honest criticism.
The Republicans blew it because they were so close. And have you heard any legitimate reasons as to why they are opposed to it? The answer is no. And that's why I'm angry.
Herman, we are, yes, that we're definitely related. This is a first. We did disagree tonight.
You know you
Good to
are
see
my
you.
brother from another mother.
You're my brother from another mother. And welcome back to Hannity Show. On last night's program, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes told us about the reports that he saw, which confirm, in fact, the Trump team, including the president-elect, was surveilled. He also told us the intel that he saw indicated that more American names were unmasked, and he was asked about this earlier today. Take a look.
In the documents you reviewed, how many names were unmasked?
I don't know that yet. So I'm aware of, just so I can be perfectly clear, so there was additional unmasking that was done in the documents that I read the other day. I don't know who asked for them to be unmasked. I just know that there are more. Now, just so you know, I was aware of the unmasking before I read the documents.
All right. Also, as we told you last night, Fox's own James Rosen is reporting that, according to his sources, Republican congressional investigators expect a potential, quote, smoking gun that will show the Obama administration spied on the Trump transition team and possibly the president-elect himself. Here with reaction tonight, former spokesman for the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Rick Grinnell, from the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, and from Circa News. She's been all over this story. Sarah Carter is back with us. All right, Sarah, let's start with what Devin Nunes said last night, and more importantly, what James Rosen is reporting here. You know, did the Obama administration, is it possible that under the guise of intelligence gathering, that they were actually spying on an incoming president or president-elect, or even before an election, which is something you've been reporting?
According to my sources, Sean, that is what they think. And so I think what Devin Nunes said and what the chairman said is that we're still looking at the reports. We're still trying to see the evidence. Now, remember, this was legally done. And Chairman Nunes made very clear that this was legally done, but it doesn't mean it was right. And under the guise of that legality, was there political espionage? And I think that's what he wants to find out. And the only way we're going to find that out is by knowing who authorized the unmasking of the names, how many names were unmasked, was there a difference between unmasking the people on the Trump campaign and the Trump team with regular American citizens? I mean, if all we see unmasked is Trump campaign and team members, then that's going to definitely be a clue.
And Jay, we're talking about a number of things here. Number one, unmasking, revealing names. That shouldn't happen when, in fact, they're surveilling a legitimate target or enemy, if you will, or maybe an ally that they're spying on. Well, they're supposed to minimize that. Then on top of that, then we've got what we know is a crime, which is leaking. Let's talk about the legal side of what is in play here.
So this is the overlooked portion, and that is the leak of this information is a violation. It's a felony. You go to jail for up to 5 years per episode. So if there's multiple leaks from the same person, it could be multiple count indictments, which is, by the way, what should be being looked at here. That's why I've been urging the impaneling of a grand jury, and that may be going on for all we know, to engage in the investigation. Now, if this was before that Executive Order 12333, it was a very limited number of people would have had that information. So we know some of it is that. After the 12/33/333 date, we know that went to 17 more agencies. That makes it more difficult. But the chairman yesterday on your broadcast said that some of this was from October, November, and December, and that was before 12/30/333. So that means the list of people should be narrow that could have engaged in both the leak and the unmasking. So we need to determine that. And I think what Sarah said is right. The fact is, if you've got a presidential, at one point, the Republican nominee, then the president-elect, being evaluated or surveilled by the intelligence agencies, this raises a whole host of legal issues.
It really does. Rick Cornell, let's talk about it from the angle of your background and experience and what you see was done wrong here.
Look, Sean, I had an intel briefing every day for 8 years. I never got to see raw intelligence. Transcripts and summary of transcripts is really something that's outrageous. That shouldn't have been done. This unintentional sweep that becomes an intentional leak looks to me like a political ploy. It started very early. We know that it started way before the transition started. So I think that there's a very serious political issue. They are claiming, the Obama team is claiming that this is a safe legal issue because they were supposedly trying to listen to foreigners. But within that realm, there could have easily been a political calculation to listen in, and then to take those transcripts and the summaries of those transcripts, make sure that those in the NSC and the political people like Ben Rhodes and Susan Rice, make sure that they have them so they can leak them to the reporters, and there you go with more rumors out in there.
That's really well said.
It's really been a problem. They're pushing rumors and then saying, let's investigate the rumors.
Sarah, I think we have a series of unanswered questions here that need to be investigated. From the journalistic side, where the story goes next, what are the questions you want answered? Then I'll ask Jay on the legal side.
I want to know who authorized the unmasking of the names. If those authorizations included Trump team members, was it just focused on that? Because we're talking about before the expansion of the 12333 executive order. I want to know if names of other names on the Trump team. I mean, these are questions that have to be answered so that we can move forward. But like I've said, Sean, I mean, right now, this is what I know. The Department of Justice has not yet authorized the FBI to open an investigation into the leak.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been told by my sources. And that has to happen. That has to happen.
Jay? On the legal side.
Well, I think I want to know what James Clapper might have had to do with this. I want to know what Attorney General Loretta Lynch had to do with this. I want to know what John Brennan had to do with this. I'd like to know what the president knew or did not know. I think the question you've asked, Sean, since the outset, who knew, when did they know, what did they know, needs to be answered. And that goes to the highest levels of our government. The idea that a president-elect was being spied on by the United States, quote, incidentally, should raise all concern with all Americans, right, left, or center.
Rick, last word.
Look, I think that it'd be easy just to figure out if Susan Rice and Ben Rhodes knew about this, because if they did, clearly President Obama knew about it. That's the political team inside the NSC. They would have been trying to help do something against Trump during the election. So I think let's just figure out if they knew, and we'll have something leading right to a political scheme right there.
This is going to get bigger and bigger. I agree totally, and I bet I know the answer too. All right, guys, we'll stay on this because it's important. All right, thank you all. Have a great weekend.